Hey everyone, welcome to episode 118 of the Ceres podcast. I'm your host Stelios and the founder and director of Ceres Pure Food Innovation. We've been talking about Christmas for some time now, but now it feels really close. It has felt weird, on this end, talking about Christmas. We were thinking about Christmas in September and October. We were doing recipes and photographs, and it just felt really weird. But now it feels pretty normal to say the words Christmas. Good thing is my appetite is starting to come back after all of that festive food. I remember one day in sort of October, FedEx driver came to collect some parcels and we gave him some of these, Christmas recipes that we're making, and his face was just, what the hell? He still ate them. He wasn't going to say no, but he was just like, what the hell? So why not take inspiration by some of the recipes that we've put together? Christmas is such a good time to build goodwill and grow your customer base by being generous and by dishing out some really tasty food. We hope everyone who made a purchase from our online shop is liking their free Christmas labels. We find it's the little things that count, and it passes on that little bit of a festive spirit. Once a month, we also send out an email with an offer. If you want to join our mailing list, then head over to the show notes and you can join our mailing list there. We recently chose 3 random customers from our online store who made a purchase. They won a great Marks & Spencer's hamper. So to them and everyone, thank you for your support. We don't think that's the end of the fun. We are planning something fun for over the Christmas period. We are just planning it, so we've got nothing solid to announce. But make sure you're following Ceres Pure Food Innovation on Facebook, and that's where you'll hear about it. Once again, you'll probably hear about it on our mailing list, so one of the two. We won't be working normal hours over the festive period, so if you want stock, be sure to get it ordered ahead of time. As many of you have noticed, we have started adding these slots at the beginning of the conversation. We'll never put them in the middle to ruin that. So the Ceres seasoned rice flour is the perfect pre-dust for frying. For years we've been making this on a small batch basis, but due to popular demand we are making it available to all. Ceres seasoned rice flour has no artificial flavourings, no artificial colourings. It's individually packed for freshness, and that's obviously great for wastage too, because you haven't got a whole bag sitting there absorbing the moisture. It's naturally allergen-free. Did you know also that having the seasoning inside the pre-dust maximises batter performance, and that can increase the life of the frying oil? Now, you may think that's a bit of an exaggeration, but the fact is the more integrity your batter has, the better the seal you have. The better the seal you have, the longer the oil lasts. Adding seasonings to batter will break down batter performance. Having it underneath does not. What I love about the Ceres seasoned rice flour is that we use a tight grade of milled rice flour and a special grade of salt. When you blend these together really aggressively, you get a fully homogenized product which boosts your consistency by a long shot. It's almost like ricey flour or salty rice flour. It's hard to explain because they literally have fused to become one. Get your seasoned rice flour today at worldofceres.com. Today's episode is with Bobby Joyce. Bobby is the Sales and Marketing Director at the well-respected fish merchant Smales, based in Hull. This is Bobby's second time on the Ceres podcast. We just wanted to catch up with him, and especially with everything that's going on at the moment with haddock and cod availability, we thought it would be a great time to get him on. Anyway, on to the episode with Bobby. We really hope you enjoy. Bobby, welcome to the Ceres podcast.
Thank you, Stelios. It doesn't seem like nearly 3 years since we last did this.
It's mental, isn't it? How I did have it in my question. It's sort of a recap, like what's been going on over the last couple of years. But
yeah, it's been eventful.
Just a little bit. Who would have thought, like when we met in 2019, that shit was proper going to hit the fan?
Yeah, it's we've had a few things in that time, challenges, but come out better for it, I think. But yeah, it's been crazy.
It must have been pretty tricky for you guys as well, because I suppose you were dictated to by Well, at Smales, you're dictated to by what your customers are doing. So if they choose to carry on staying open, then you guys need to support that demand, obviously, and you don't want to leave anybody in the lurch. So, I guess, there was the whole furlough thing, and then I guess, did you creep people back in slowly, or did it just sort of? How did it go for you guys?
I think, probably like most businesses, still, we just went by the seat of our pants really, and once we knew what was coming, literally, I would have thought within maybe, I can't imagine there was more than 100 shops across the country that stayed open for that first 3 weeks. So yeah, we spoke with, we all talked as a management team, decided we'd close the doors. I mean, we didn't have a choice really, as you say. When your customer base shuts down overnight, it takes that decision out of your hands in some respect. But it was strange. And then there was a few of us, Simon and Lee Smales, myself, and a couple of the operations guys and the finance director. We continued working. I was working from home for a few weeks, and it was just gradual. We'd just getting the odd phone call, and then the odd phone call turned into quite a few phone calls, and then so we just literally brought people back one at a time. And everyone was very up for coming back to work as soon as possible, and yeah, just slowly rebuilt from there. And I think the difficulty for us is we're not like a lot of the other distributors. Everything we sell is held in Hull. All the stock's held here, and it lives here and leaves from here to go all around the country. So it wasn't simple that if a shop in Devon needed a delivery, we don't have a stock holding depot down there. Everything's up in Hull, so we can't just get a driver in for the day and send him out. It was tricky in that respect, but it was just day to day, week to week, really.
It's fair to say that, no doubt, especially in the early days, once things ramped up, it was different. But in the early days, it's fair to say that, like you say, you just did what you had to do. And there's no doubt some people would have been disappointed if they were using a couple of cases a week down south, when that would have been pretty tricky for you guys. There's nothing you could have probably done there.
Well, yeah, I think, look, by and large, everyone got it. And as soon as we could be back up and running, we were. I still, but I think we all stand by that decision to stop. It was the right thing to do, ethically and from a commercial point of view. But yeah, I mean, there's a few shops, and literally a handful, refused to deal with us because we closed. Now they still won't buy offers.
Oh, they took it as either a personal insult, or was it against their political beliefs? Or
I have no idea. And I'm not talking people who would have bought regular offers anyway. So that's strange. But I think I spent a lot of those early days, because there was no sales calls to make, just ringing around, general catch up, make sure people, long-standing customers, were okay. Obviously, there was a little bit of trying to get our heads around the cash flow situation, what's coming in, what's going out. And so everybody, by and large, I think the majority of people were great. They got it, and they were in the same boat, really.
It was scary times, or whatever you say. Like, I'm a small company, you guys are a very big company, and once that treadmill just stopped, it was almost like, what now? Like, it was really, and we didn't stop it, you didn't stop it. Everything just grinded to that eventual halt, and it was just like there was fear and stress, and you could see why emotions were ramped up, weren't they?
Yeah, I think it was the uncertainty. How long is this going to go on for?
It was only 3 weeks, Bobby.
Yeah. But once we stopped, you'll get it, and a lot of others listening to this will get it. A certain amount of fixed overhead costs, they didn't stop. We still got a cold store switched on that needed to be paid for. Vehicle rent. So there were significant losses in the early days. Luckily, we're a financially sound company; we could deal with that. But yeah, that was the scary bit, really, in the initial period of that first week or two. Well, how long is this going to go on for?
Yeah, and we're still in it in some ways. And I know it's not the same; it's evolved, and it's become something else. And I do hope that it's we're at the end of it now. I hope to say, and we're definitely out of the thick of it. and industry's back up and running. And how are you guys seeing trade at the moment?
I think generally trade's pretty good. I wouldn't say COVID's been good for the industry in one way, but it has in another. I think we're all very lucky that we're in this industry because we was one of the first to be back up and running. And it's dragged a lot of shops up to where they need to be in terms of their online presence, being with the aggregators, having click and collect, these things. So trade since we've reopened, unless the other couple of lockdowns that we had, aside from those weeks, we've been really pleased. The pandemic has actually benefited us in terms of it's probably opened a few more doors for us with certain customers we're now supplying that we weren't previously. Although, like I said, we do have one or two walk by offers because of that. But and it's opened a few supply avenues that we were tapping into previously as well. So all in all, we've come out of it, I think, a better business. And using that initial time to reflect and restructure, I think if any business in any industry should have been doing that, really, taking that opportunity that was forced on them to just work out how they needed to be structured going forward.
I guess one of the things that COVID also did is that, and you touched on it somewhat, is that it made you stop saying we can't, and actually you just start doing. And for whatever reason there was before, whether was there some other allegiance or some other deal with somebody else, or I think it just made you think, you know what, let's break down this barrier and let's make it happen. And I think we probably supply more wholesalers now. We also do the direct deliveries. So we've seen our business sort of grow after it as well. And there was that initial shock, but I almost feel like when a business comes close to sort of death in some ways, you do get this, I don't know, this burning desire to sort of innovate and grow again. And I think that's probably happened to all of your customers and all my customers. They were sitting at home and they were told, oh, you can only reopen if you've got no queues. Oh, okay, how can I open with no queues? Oh, click and collect. Oh, okay, then I'll do it. Yeah. And they did it. And now a lot of them are saying, I don't want to go back to the way it was.
Yeah, but I think it's, I briefly listened to our previous podcast because it was painful. I can't stand listening to myself. So I did try and listen to a bit last night, and I'm not sure if it's something we touched on last time, but the generation kind of below me now, and my kids, and they're used to ordering on apps, click and collect, or using an aggregator or whatever it may be. And if you're not in that arena, you will miss out on sales. And there's a definite reluctance for a large proportion of our sector to get involved in that area, and COVID's forced their hand, which I think ultimately will benefit them.
Yeah, in some ways, when we recorded that in 2019, it feels like it was a decade ago. Like, it just feels like so much has happened over the last few years and it has, obviously, so much has happened, but just in such a short space of time. And, it is, who'd have thought that, a few months ago, people were worried about their business, and now they're worried about the fact they've got to pay tax on a grant they were given to by the government.
I saw that, yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, I think the furlough scheme went well for a lot of businesses, and obviously the VAT reduction for our sector has been huge. And if you are a fish and chip shop worth your salt, if you haven't done extremely well in the past 18 months because of the VAT reduction and things like that, then there's something wrong. So, fair play to them. They've stayed open, they've fed people. I think a lot of people will have fallen back in love with fish and chips. Maybe that weren't having it regularly before the pandemic, when there's no pubs open. I think there was a strange period where people wouldn't eat Chinese food because of the connotations of where the virus came from.
That was early on. That was pretty
early on, yeah. But I just think, it forced people to try fish and chips again.
Yeah.
And the upshot of that is, hopefully, with the technological advances they've made, if people are going to eat it twice a month instead of once a month or once every 6 months, then it can only be a good thing for us.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, I think you're right to some degree. I think, pubs were closed, restaurants were closed, hotels, where were you going to go? You weren't going to go to a hotel. Everything was closed. So, people were probably spending money on nicer food and fish and chips. And then, you know, I think as an industry, we weren't the first to get onto click and collect and just eats and aggregators and all of that. But I think once it happened, it was pretty swift. And it was like we were
Yeah.
never missing from it, if I'm honest. Um, Obviously, that always throws in when things are moving fast. There's issues that arise, like, are you pricing it right? Are you doing this? We'll think about it later. Let's just get open. And I think for the most part, people did that really well.
Mm.
It does bring us to today, and I'd be remiss to not touch on the current cod and haddock situation. I didn't listen. I didn't listen back to our podcast actually, because I wanted to sort of come into it with a fresh mind. And although the price of fish is always going to be contentious, especially, I think I might have said it in the last podcast, when it was £80 a case, people were probably still moaning it was too expensive, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think people always live in today's mindset. They don't ever think back and say, oh, well, we had it good when it was 80, or we had it good when it was 120, or 140 seemed decent, you know.
Yeah.
And so, if we look at cod for a moment, there's a lot of, from what I understand, there's a lot of smaller cod in the system. Prices are 5 to 8, 8 to 16, seem to be around 40, £50 a case cheaper. Is that accurate, would you say?
At the moment, yeah. I'd say the 5 to 8, 8 to 16 prices are still lower than they were pre-pandemic, or similar to where, they're certainly not higher than they were pre-pandemic. And throughout the pandemic, there was a reduction. The trawlers kept fishing. They didn't tie up when COVID hit. They carried on fishing. I suppose as long as there wasn't, nobody with COVID, that they're safer at sea than anywhere. But yeah, there's a number of reasons why cod prices are so high on larger sizes, particularly at the moment. But we've got to pay what we need to pay to keep the fish coming into the country ultimately.
What do you think the main reasons are for those that have been under a rock for a while?
I think it's one of those things, Stelios, where there's quite a few factors. I think there's problems in production on things like chicken in the Far East, and a lot of manufacturers are having production issues. So I think certain countries are turning to fish. The American retail market's been extremely strong for fish, for cod and haddock. There's record prices on headless and gutted throughout the world at the moment on cod, and we have to pay the trawlers the same price pro rata for fillets. Otherwise, and it is something we touched on in the last podcast, that it's much easier for the crews to do the headless and gutted, so they'll choose to do that if they've got the capability. And slight decreases coming in cod quota, although that's not a concern, I don't think. And we've got a situation where there's very little haddock supply of the right size. So more businesses that would have used haddock, be it retail or cost sector or food service or the fish and chip sector, are having switched to cod. So that's placing more demand. And then at the moment, as always happens this time of year, the fish being landed is more of a small to medium size. You won't see larger cod fillets till the new year, and that's just a natural thing.
So when I spoke to Daniel from Linebury, PHL Sea Gold, I don't know if you work with Daniel. I have no idea.
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
and he enlightened me as to the fact that a lot of cod and haddock goes to Boston in America. Yeah. And I had no idea, because I just thought China. Everyone's just, and I guess that's what we always heard. But I guess their tastes in America are very similar to ours over here, especially, being, sort of very similar demographic, especially Boston. So for you, in your eyes, mostly at the moment, it's a supply and demand issue. Supply is normal or tight, and demand is high.
Yes, yeah, that's pretty much it. And there's a number of reasons why that demand's high, but they're all contributing to the same outcome: is that prices have risen on large cod, and that's where we're at.
In your mind, do you think the price of cod, and we'll probably touch on haddock shortly, do you think it's peaked yet, or have we still got some more in your experience in the 20 odd years?
No, I don't think it's peaked. I think like I say, the quota next year is slightly down, although they are carrying this year. They won't fish the entire quota, so they're allowed to carry some over. So next year I think the quota's set at 708,000 tons. I think they'll probably end up catching about 750,000. But fishing's poor at the moment as well. That's not helping. The weather's not great, I'm told. I think we'll need to get into the new quota year and get some good fishing behind us, and then see where it is, see what demand is. It's unlikely the haddock situation is going to change for a while. But we'll just have to wait and see once they get out there and get fishing.
Yeah, and obviously, chatting to Daniel about haddock, it was made clear that it's going to be tight for a few more years because it's cyclical, and they need to. I think he said they need to wait another 2-3 years before some of those groups are ready. So you're talking to a lot of fish and chip shops daily, or your teams are now, and you'd be aware that a lot of shops have probably come off haddock to go on to cod. That obviously, like you said earlier, puts more pressure on cod. Do you see those shops just staying on cod? If their customers are having it, do you see them just saying, I'm staying on that? Or do you see them going back to haddock?
Yeah, I think it all depends on where the price sits, and at the moment you're getting we will get the odd ton of haddock land here and there if someone is lucky to fall on a little bit. But the price differential at the minute, is high. But the fact of the matter is there isn't the fish there for them to use. That for all the shops that want to use haddock, it's not there. And I think as and when it becomes more available, then some will switch back. I think regardless of price, because they want to be seen to be selling haddock in their areas. But as you said, it's cyclical, and we may get little patches where they catch slightly larger haddocks. But I can remember in my time here, still we've had scenarios and years where all the haddocks been really large and small haddocks been a real problem. Now we've got that's flipped over, and with abundance of haddocks under 5 ounce, but very little over. So it's just not a lot you can do about it.
Well, a friend of mine was texting earlier, and he said that a lot of shops in sort of West Yorkshire and Yorkshire that use haddock have been going back and changing their menu, changing it over to fish so they can switch between cod and haddock if they need to. Also, if they were MSC certified, that would have not allowed them to do such a thing. So they've now cancelled the MSC certification to give them that flexibility. I guess MSC certification and all the certifications are great when you're in the times of plenty and there's no issues, but the minute things get tight, things get dropped. It's nothing to do with no one's judging MSC by what they do, but people want the flexibility to just sell whatever they need to sell at the time, don't they?
I think so. At the end of the day, I suppose I don't know where it stands if you want to advertise it as fish rather than the actual species you're selling, but I don't see why they'd need to cancel their MSC certification.
Because MSC, one of the rules is, I was told, that you need to state what species you're selling. Now, you don't have to normally, as long as if a customer says, can I have cod or haddock, you give them cod or haddock. So from the eyes of the law, if you went into a shop and said, can I have fish and chips, they can literally pick out anything out the hot box. But if you went in and said, I want cod and chips, they would have to give you cod. MSC frowns upon that, and that's
rightly so,
and they want traceability. But as long as, even if you wanted fish and chips, most people would just give you, in our industry, cod or haddock, wouldn't they? And they would flip between what's the most expensive, I guess, pretty much. And go for the one that's going to give them the most profit. It was just interesting that some shops that have always said, well, we can only do haddock here, and now clearly not doing haddock there and telling their customers about it. And they don't seem to be screaming about it either. Everyone seems to be just getting on with it.
No, I mean, I don't own a shop. If I did, I think I'd try and be upfront with the customers. be honest with them. I think, I remember seeing Miller's put out a great post for their customers explaining exactly why they were switching to cod. And I don't think their trade has suffered. I'm sure they'll get people asked for haddock, but they've done the homework so they can explain to the customers exactly why. And it's, like I say, it's not really adversely affected them. I don't think there will be shops getting some haddock, Stelios, and I think there's a little bit more joy in Icelandic waters on catching haddock. But that's not going to support everybody that would traditionally buy haddock.
No, I guess if they want it, they've got to pay for it. Simple, really.
Yeah.
And so how long, if we've not hit the peak yet, when do you think we're going to see the peak? And how many years do you sort of envisage this situation correcting itself? And I think, like I said to you before the podcast, for many, a correction would mean cheap, like back to, where they want it. Do you need to reset people's expectations a little bit? Or, or is it just going to be, is there a new price that people need to get used to, is what I'm probably trying to allude to.
Yes, that's a bit of a crystal ball question, really. I don't know where the peak will hit or when it will hit. There's so many factors that can affect it, really. The haddock one isn't going away.
Mm-hmm.
Other markets, whether other products become a bit more easy to source and there isn't that reliance on fish. It's hard to tell. We would like to think that by February, March, you'd be somewhere near the peak and things may normalise, but it all depends on how fishing is, what they go out and catch, and if they catch quick, catch early, or if they decide to, spread it out over the year. But as you would expect, the shops will want the prices as cheap as they can be. The quota holders will want the best return they can possibly get for their quota. We're just stuck in the middle trying to barter and make sure both sides get what they need.
Mm. Yeah, well, I guess that's the difficult position you're in. And, I've had a similar conversation with potato merchants, and they say, look, the farmers want what they want and the fish and chip shops want what they want. We have to sort of be somewhere in the middle, and it needs to be a win-win for everybody. I just think everyone just probably has to get used to this. Prices are just through the roof. I think a customer rang me earlier, and we were talking about, cod and cod specifically, because he's took haddock off the menu. And he says he usually uses 1632. He's switched over to 816. He's saving roughly what you said earlier, about 40-50 a case. But he said, even, and you said this as well before we set up, even if he didn't use the trimmings, he's still better off cost-wise. But he's using the trimming. So he's getting his fish to where he wants it, being generous as well, getting the fish to the size he wants to get it to, and then using the trimmings to make homemade fish cakes. And he said he's making more margin than he would have. I guess, like you said earlier, I guess if people want to be flexible, especially with cod, because haddock, there's no flexibility. But with cod, if people want to be a bit flexible, there is ways around it, isn't there?
Yeah, I think, it's something I've seen more. In my early days here, people did used to jump around the sizes a lot more than they do now. People tend to stick to what they know. But if you don't make your own fish cakes, you could do cod bites for kids. There's things you can do with the trimmings if it's not your normal size you're cutting, and there are options out there that will save you money on the case price of your fish. It's going with where the supply is, really, and where there's more supply, there's usually a better price.
Yeah, and also I guess from it's easy for me to say this from a wholesaler point of view, manufacturer point of view, but from our point of view, I guess this is a good time to be a good customer. You want to be paying your bills on time. You want to be causing as little hassle as possible, because if you fall into the other camp that maybe causes a bit of trouble or always, nags for the lowest price and then pays really late, those people aren't probably going to get looked after in times like this, are they?
Yeah, you could say that, and in an ideal world, that would be your stance all the time. I think that is the one thing in the pandemic, and it helped us massively. Pre-pandemic, I think quite a lot of customers were spoilt in terms of the delivery service could get from a lot of people, or credit terms maybe, or there might be it allowed, half of our costs is transport. The business entire cost, half of it is actually on distributing the products. So, to certain areas we rebuilt with longer lead times. And I think customers were more willing to work with that and understand the challenges. That's been compounded with driver shortages, which everybody knows about. So, and in terms of payment, obviously I think it's been a bit easy for the shops with the VAT reduction. Like I said, they should have been better off and paying bills on time, and the vast majority have been great still, to be fair. And it's the nature of the beast in a way that there'll be an element of people that will always try and save a quid here and a quid there and jump around their suppliers, and that's completely their prerogative.
Yeah.
But hopefully it's given everybody a bit of a refresh on valuing their customer, their supplier, and their own staff in every business.
Yeah. No, definitely. One thing I wanted to touch on, because again, I've been trying to ask anybody who's fish related on the podcast this. One of the issues I might have mentioned in our last podcast, but I've mentioned with lots of fish related people, is that it's sort of a broad thing about sustainability. But if a country only relies on, if a country's population mostly relies on 2 or 3 species, in this country 5, but the fish and chip industry, it's cod and haddock, that's all we rely on. How sustainable is that? And I know over the years you guys have tried to introduce different species, and and if they did do well, you'd still be selling them. And I'm sure you do dip in and out selling different species. But how sustainable can it be? How difficult does it get just only focusing on cod and haddock? Wouldn't it be good if we did see people, maybe dipping into Save, Coley, Save, Pollock, Tusk? Well, maybe not Pollock. I don't like Pollock, but I don't think Pollock's nowhere near for me as good as cod and haddock frozen at sea. But there's other species that are. So, in your years, is it something sea fish need to be doing? Do you think?
Well, I think there's certainly more inquiry, particularly with the haddock shortage. The fact that price is one thing, but the volume of stock just isn't there. So a lot of people have been using hake as an alternative to haddock. So and there's a few shops where you can see there's a regular delivery of hake going in each week or every other week. Pollock, there's not really, as you said, there's not really the quality raw material out there to stand up to frozen at sea cod and haddock, and frozen at sea pollock tends to be only available in the small sizes. And there's big demand on pollock, obviously, for things like fish fingers and value meals. So yeah, it would be nice to look around. I don't think there's lots more options that would stand up to to being part of fish and chips, unless you're going to go down the route of cooking it differently.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that you have the MSC in the background, the quota system works very, very well. I think it's sustainable from that point of view. The species is very well managed, and we did a presentation to some of our staff last week on the quota system since the 1980s. Each year where it's been at, it's been as low as 210,000 tons and as high as 1 million tons. But it's very steady now, and they make little tweaks, and that purely is, the next year you see the benefit of that. But there's enough to go around. I suppose it's other markets, as I keep referring to. If they're going to jump on the bandwagon and want cod and haddock, then it's going to predominantly go to the highest bidder.
Yeah, I guess that is all. That's just what's going to happen, isn't it? And I think I don't think it's a secret, but anybody that listens to this podcast will know that I'm very cautious about how fast people increase prices at the retail level. So in my mind, fish and chips has been around for 160 years or so, formally anyway. And it's been a value for money meal forever, and all of a sudden trying to ramp up to make it on the premium end of the market, although the species we use, cod and haddock, are the premium end of the market. there's no sort of argument there. I see fish and chip shops in the group saying, "Well, I want to get to £10, or we're going to get to £10," and then I look around and I got a message earlier of a screenshot of a shop in Bradford area, £3 regular fish and chips, and I saw the portion. It was probably like a 6-7 ounce and a good scoop and a half of chips. And then you probably go to somewhere like your neck of the woods, like Hull. I don't know, fiver sound about right? 4.50 a fiver for fish and chips around Hull neck of the woods.
Yeah, I mean, you can still get a fish and chip special in Hull, which is probably about a 2 to 3 ounce bit of haddock, chips and peas for £3.
Yeah. So, but obviously the fish is a bit on the smaller side, so that's all right. But
yeah,
and then there's such a huge discrepancy, that you could have one part of the UK, charging a tenner, and another part selling it for 3-4 quid. And I think one thing I've always said to people, before you just whack up your prices, look at your margins. For me, that's the biggest thing. And I think that's where me and maybe someone like Andrew Crook may disagree slightly, although we agree fundamentally on everything, but we disagree on the approach. Is that he'll just say, put your prices up, be safe. Whereas you got to remember, in this business, it's a volume business. And I think people do need to be careful about putting up their prices. Although, many times I have said to people, once I've looked at their prices and their costs, I would say, okay, yeah, maybe you do need to put up your prices. So I think maybe looking at it from a business point of view, a margin approach rather than a gut feeling is what I'm always trying to tell people to do.
Yeah, I think it's difficult, isn't it? I suppose it's when these guys are on the high street and they're competing against big brands, that it's the same price across all the stores, and but you go to 3 different Italian restaurants, you'll pay 3 different prices for a stroganoff or a pasta dish, the same, essentially the same dish. I don't know if that's a good example or a bad example, but you've just got to, I think each shop's got to not undersell the products. I think that all shops should appreciate, what goes into the products they source, be that fish or potatoes or what have you. But yeah, if we can get out of this race to the bottom on pricing, which I think it will, but conversely, it cannot be easy for the shops at the minute with the number of increases coming their way on just about everything they use to end up serving the product.
Yeah. No, I think, and again, to flip it on its head, I've got a wholesaler in London who supplies our products. I was on the phone with him last week. He's had oil prices go up. He's had flour prices go up. He's had, you name it, everything, packaging. So he's passing it on. And when he's going to shops, they're moaning. And this is central London, some of these shops, and they're moaning that he's expensive. And he's saying, look, I'm not going to argue with you. You need to put up your prices. He goes, don't bring it back to me. I've given you the prices, you work out your margins and set them accordingly. And I can see the frustration, whereas wholesalers would have probably never said that to shop owners before. They would have just been like, oh, we're really sorry. They'd be quite polite about it. But then even he's getting exasperated and he's saying, look, don't look at me, look at yourself. And so there is a big cross-section at the minute. No one's right and no one's wrong. It's a big mess that everyone's trying to wade through.
Yeah, we have them conversations all day, every day with customers. I can buy off another supplier, and they're a little bit cheaper than you. And generally, the response is, well, it might not cost them the same as it does us to get it to you. That ultimately that's going to be the determining factor on where we set our prices to customers. And as you say, they've got to work out if our products or our services is the best for them. That's got to make a margin to get it to them. That's all it is. And then they've got to work out what they do with that product to make their margin.
Yeah. No, and that's all they can do, I guess. It's all they can do. And I guess if everyone looks at their business, internally, then everything corrects itself. If everyone sets it to where they're happy, everything works. It is just going to be tough. I just really feel that people need to be careful about putting up prices at the retail level. I guess if they need to do it, then they need to do it. But it should be, get their accountant to look at the figures and say, all right, here's your GP, here's your net profit, here's where you need to be. And also be talking to people like you, saying, oh, look, what's it going to be like in a month, do you think? Should I buy a little bit extra now? I guess nobody wants to ask that question because they don't want to know that the price is going to be higher in a month or 2 months. And I guess in some ways, this is where the groups on the Facebook groups for fish and chips have been invaluable, because people are talking to each other and they can see that it's only moving in one direction at the moment. And that probably means that customers don't think one wholesaler is having it on, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I do look on the Facebook groups, and I think when some of us as the fish importers, because there's a few of us on there, there's even a couple of people, like I think Daniel might even be on one of them from Linebury.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously when we're trying to be honest about how we see the situation, I don't know if some people put them posts out just to try and see if they can find a cheaper price, or whether they actually want to know the honest appraisal of the situation as we see it. But I think nearly everything I've read on there from the importers, businesses like ours, I've seen very little that isn't factually correct or hasn't come true, in the next couple of weeks from where they said it would.
Yeah. And, there's always, going to be someone that disagrees, but then the market dictates what it dictates. And, this is just the way it goes. There's bigger things going on at the moment. And so we just need to sort of, one thing that's been on my mind a lot lately is, it is, going back to that. It's just sort of going back to the current situation, and I do wonder if consumers are ready to pay more as well, because if we touched on it earlier. You look at Seaspiracy, you look at all of these things. I watched Seaspiracy. I didn't really believe a lot of what was said. Some of it was worrying, I guess. Like, one thing that I found, which was absolutely disgusting, was the treatment of shark finning. But I guess that was there to create shock factor and to stop people from eating seafood completely. It is an awful practice, there is no doubt. Did you guys have any headache after that, or was it just more conversational?
I think the only headaches we had were the ones we created ourselves, because we were just wasn't when something like that goes out, you can't be certain of what the ripples are going to be from it. When I watched it, I did think you could see it was heavily edited to push one side of the agenda, or one opinion. There's certain elements of it I think could have been handled better by some of the people, but then, like the MSC didn't want to set themselves up where it was edited to make them look silly, and you can understand them just shying away and trying to give a response that couldn't be manipulated or misconstrued. And there were elements of it, like the shark finning, like you say. I'm not too familiar with what goes on in it, but it looked awful. I think generally, in terms of the fish we import, there was very little on there that could, that reflected in a bad light, really, and that there wasn't a robust response for. So, in general, did it affect anything? It didn't stop. It didn't stop our fish sales growing and our customers' fish sales growing. And I do think, as an industry, certainly on the fish and chip industry, we've got enough in the locker to knock back anything thrown at us by that documentary, I would hope.
I do think MSC were in a tight situation. It was a lose-lose. If they went on there, like everybody else that went on there, it would have got misconstrued. They would have looked like they'd said something when they didn't say it. We saw how they treated the other organizations on there. What makes you think they would have treated MSC any different? So I think, looking back, MSC did the right thing, because look, now Seaspiracies fell by the wayside, and they've got no comments from MSC. You go onto MSC website, you just see the positives that they're trying to promote, and I don't think MSC's ever shied away from the difficulties, if I'm honest. When I've spoken to anybody at MSC, they've always been pretty honest and open about the difficulties of what the industry faces. So that's my view anyway.
Yeah, and it was a global thing. I think when I first watched it, I was waiting and hoping for the MSC to come out fighting on there. But then you quickly realised if they did, it just wouldn't have been presented in a way that would look anything but bad on the MSC. So in hindsight, like you said, they probably did the right thing, and the work that they are doing, you would hope if they're doing the work correctly, they can then present that in a more sensible way, which rebuffs everything, or in some cases, usually, they might even might say, actually, yeah, we're already on with this issue. This is one of the things we're here to try and tackle.
Yeah.
That nobody's pretending it's a perfect world and that everything's operating ethically how it should be across the world. But there's certain countries and economies that not as wealthy or as fortunate as we are, so they maybe can't be as picky and choosy about how they go about doing things.
Yeah. No, of course.
But that's politics, which
No,
not my remit.
Talking of politics, so no, it's not really that political. Is Kirkella back out there and fishing again? Because it was in the news that it wasn't, and then I saw recently it is again. So what's that about?
Yeah, they've managed to, basically, when it's really, I think, other than some delays importing and exporting, it's been the only way we've been majorly affected by Brexit as an industry, is that traditionally the Norwegians gave up a percentage of their quota for the EU, and that would come to the UK. And in return, the UK would give access to Norwegian vessels for other species in our waters, herrings or Tuscan ling being some as well, which are products that we don't eat or use as a country. But my understanding is, because of Brexit and various other reasons, we refuse Norway access to fishing those species in our waters, which they've fished for many, many years. So in return, the quota allowance didn't get given to the UK because we're no longer part of the EU. So that quota would have gone to Kirkella. Now they're working with a limited quota up near Bear Island. So they're getting small quota is the Kirkella, but I don't know this for certain still, because we don't deal direct with Kirkella. But I'm sure it's not enough to sustain them in their current format, doing what they're doing. The biggest impact of that, it wouldn't be a problem because the quota could be transferred elsewhere and the ship could be moved and rebadged under a different country. But then obviously there are an element of people who work on the vessel or in the offices here that, their jobs might be in jeopardy if that happens. I think it's an ongoing conversation between the UK government and the Norwegian government, but I'm not so sure, how close they are to getting a solution for that.
So although it's going out, it's not catching nowhere near what it was.
No, it's on a limited quote, spare bit of quota that they managed to get. I think she's back in Hull now. I think she came back in last week, I think, or the week before. I think that was their last trip for the year.
It is tricky times, obviously, with Brexit and the whole everyone ramping up the rhetoric. I don't know if you've been following the France situation and them kicking off about them not getting licenses off the UK to fish in the waters. And obviously Macron and all them lot are just, look, they're well within their rights to kick off. Everyone is on every side. Everybody wants the better deal, don't they? So
yeah, of course.
But it was interesting that I read that the British government had given over 180 licenses, and they're saying they want another 50. But the EU said that in one of the rules that you should only give licenses to those that can prove that they used to fish in that area before Brexit. Well, these boats can't prove that they did fish in British waters, because I have a feeling that they were going back and selling it without paperwork, because why else wouldn't you have proof that you was in those waters? Surely you can turn around and say, oh yeah, I went there. Look, here's my paperwork.
Yeah,
but no,
you would think that would be the case, but it feels to me like, fishing rights has been a bit of a political football, really, between the EU.
Hasn't it always been, do you think?
Yeah, but I think when you look in the grand scheme of monetary value wise, that the things that
it's nothing
made a real difference, that what they're arguing over is, it will be very meaningful to the small fishing businesses that stand to lose or benefit. Don't get me wrong, but it's they seem to have used fishing as a real
Well,
maybe because it's in that grey area of it's in you're in an area of water. There's no land border. There's no
I guess look, I'd like to add that I respect a lot of these British fishermen that are going out there and fishing. It's a hard job, and like it is for any fisherman wherever you are in the world, it's a solid job. But it is only a very small amount of the GDP's income, and the government has spent a lot of time on it. And you could argue that they've been listening to a minority that when they wouldn't usually do that. So it is a very tricky situation. Um, to some degree, I'd like to see, fishing become a big thing in the UK again. I know it is big, but it'd be nice to see it be bigger and like it was, maybe like the olden days, I guess. So maybe the olden days should be where they are in the olden days, and maybe
to
that's
some degree. It goes back to what you were saying earlier. The fact of the matter is, most of what we catch, we export because we're not eating it. So you would see more British caught fish if more British people were eating it.
yeah. I guess it is chicken and egg. It's this whole situation. British people don't eat it, so we send it abroad because they appreciate it more. They're willing to pay for it. They're willing to eat it. So, but obviously, to do that, we need to scratch their back a little bit and let them come back into our waters. So it's a very tricky situation. I just wish, and I've been saying it for years, I just wish the British population had more appetite for some of the seafood that is in the British waters. I just think it'd be great. Why wouldn't it? All right. I guess there is some fresh haddock and some fresh cod, but not in the numbers that there is for frozen at sea. And then you've got some salmon, I guess, but that's where it ends. That's pretty much where it ends, isn't it? Maybe some shellfish, but again, not much.
So shellfish. We do some great shellfish. Yeah, but there will be other species. But how do people access that these days? As well, the supermarkets are only interested in the core items. The famous items, if you like. Fishmongers, there aren't really any anymore. So it's how it's, and maybe that's Sea Fish's job, and it's something they're constantly working on. Trying to get people to eat a wider range of seafood, and as you say, what one follows the other.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think we've touched on a lot of topics, but one thing I did want to sort of touch on as well is that your drivers were mostly working throughout all of COVID, for I'd say 95% of it when you reopen. I bet they've been at the thick of it as well, haven't they? Like, adapting to different policies and, being out on the road, and being out on the road is lonely for the most part anyway, let alone when you've got all this COVID stuff knocking about. So
I think, most drivers have that mindset. That's how they like to work. They like to work independently. We employ around 90 people at the moment in what we do, and every single one of them throughout the pandemic has been absolutely first class. From the cleaners to the sales staff to the accounts team. But the cold store team, they're obviously having to work, in cold conditions. So, and early on, that was highlighted. That might be, a vector for spreading. We was lucky we had no outbreaks, and we managed that really well. And them guys came in and worked really hard. And yeah, the drivers, they just, they were brilliant. They were in and out of shops. Obviously, we gave them everything that they needed, that we could give them PPE wise to keep them feeling comfortable. And we never asked one person to work who was uncomfortable. Everything was done on I'm happy to be here basis. Between us all, we worked it really well, and they did a grand job. As I said earlier, I think we're lucky to be in the sector we're in because we were all back to work pretty quick. I'm sure there's other sectors who still aren't back to work fully. So we needed the shops open to be able to keep going, and they needed our drivers to be willing to go in and out of 15, 20 different premises every day. For them to keep going as well, for them to get the supply they needed. So it's everybody who works for us has been a real credit to themselves and to the business, really. So we thank them, and we've certainly let them know how much we appreciate them.
Well, that's what it's about. And I always say that the drivers are usually right. I know people talk to telesales and so on, but drivers have the most effect on a business like yours. I always think, and the likes of Rise, Pride, Tea Quality, and so on, because if they are having a bad day, that ends up being a bad day for the fish and chip shop owner usually, because and I always say, I always say to fish and chip shops, feed these guys, offer them a drink, make them try and feel better. Let them, I always used to have one guy who used to come. I'd say to him, look, just take a seat, we'll sort this, have something to eat, because they're doing long days, and it's and it is
it's physically tough, that job.
Especially you guys, solid blocks of fish.
It's averaging 20 kilos a time on the blocks they're carrying. It's not an easy job by any stretch. But we've always tried to offer a service where we work around the customer. Their delivery windows, which is not always easy, because if you're delivering to 15 shops, probably 12 of them will want it in the same delivery time.
They want it at 2 o'clock or at 11 o'clock.
Yeah, before 11 or after 4, which we want to be delivering between 11 and 4 ideally. But that's the challenge. But no, I mean, again, customers in general were extremely good to our drivers and extremely understanding, given the space they needed when particularly, like I say, in the first 6 months of last year. So again, just thank everybody who worked with us, and it's been really nice to stop, then get going. Not nice to stop, but nice to get going again and rebuild, restructure. It's given us a lot of fresh impetus to input new ideas. Identify where we're going to invest in the next few years, bring some people on. So it's we've made the most of a challenging situation.
Good, and
you can only do that if your staff are bought into it.
No, exactly. And they need to be behind you 100%, because otherwise nothing's going to happen. Nothing.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, look, honestly, I wish you guys the best of luck in the future. Is there anything I've missed off? Is there anything you really want to discuss that I maybe got carried away and forgot about?
I think we feel, again, in a time of crisis, fish and chips has shone through, and that's really good to see. And for all that people may be worrying about prices at the moment, I think there'll always be a desire to supply our market. There will be plenty of fish to go around, and prices always fluctuate up and down. But this, the fish and chip sector has been very, very important to quota holders throughout the pandemic. It was one of the only markets open to them at the time, and I think they're really grateful to see that their efforts at sea are supporting an industry that's kept going and supported its the nation while it was a very difficult time.
Yeah,
and a lot are investing. There's new vessels, lots of new trawlers and long liners being commissioned and built, which is, we've got one company who've just commissioned 10 new vessels, Naribo, who own Glacialis. So that's that's $500 million investment.
Wow.
And they're not doing that unless they see a bright future for fish and chips or for producing fillets.
Yeah. Wow. So
I think the industry's it's set up to be in a good place, and those who work hard on keeping their quality right and their pricing right, and doing what they're doing to get fish and chips into people's homes or on people's plates is going to be a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that sentiment completely, Bobby. And thank you for your time today. I know how busy you all are, and I wish you all the best of luck.
Cheers, Stelios. Good to see you again.
Talk soon, mate.
Take care.
Massive thank you to Bobby for joining me on the podcast. If you want to follow Bobby or Smales, their links will be in the show note. You really should be following Bobby. He's in the fish and chip groups. He's really knowledgeable and very honest too. Be sure to share this podcast with friends on social media. If you like this episode, then chances are they will like it too. And also, if you want, if you are buying from our website and you do want offers, be on our mailing list, which is also in the show notes.